Step into the shadows of history with Real Photos of World War II You Shouldn't See, a chilling collection of rare and haunting images that reveal the brutal reality behind the headlines. These aren't the photos found in textbooks. They capture raw emotion, devastation, and moments censored or forgotten. Viewer discretion is advised. Once seen, they can't be unseen. At just 17, Lepa Radic joined the Yugoslav resistance. Captured and tortured, she refused to betray her comrades. Publicly hanged in 1943, her final words were defiant. "You will know them when they come to avenge me." At just 12, Alfred Czech saved wounded soldiers under fire using a cart. Shot in the lung and captured by Soviets, he returned home in 1947 to find his father dead. A tragic fate for a boy-turned-war hero. 14-year-old Czesława Kwoka, a Catholic girl labeled undesirable, was beaten and photographed in Auschwitz. Her bruised face became iconic. Soon after, she was killed by phenol injection, just one of thousands of murdered children. In June 1944, Nazi troops massacred 643 villagers in Oradour-sur-Glane, France. Most of them women and children burned alive inside a church. Young Roger Godfrey was the sole survivor. The ruins still stand as a memorial. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise assault on Pearl Harbor, killing over 2,400 Americans and destroying dozens of ships and aircraft. Explosions engulfed the USS Shaw as sailors scrambled amid chaos. The next day, the United States entered the war, irrevocably altering the course of history. On Saipan in 1944, Marines stood silently as one of their own nearly collapsed, mentally shattered. Long battles, sleepless nights, unbearable heat, and fallen comrades pushed soldiers past the brink. The deepest wounds of war were often invisible. Ira Hayes, one of the iconic flag raisers on Iwo Jima, returned home a national hero, but haunted. He battled alcoholism, isolation, and trauma, dying alone in the desert. He helped lift a symbol of victory, yet never escaped the war inside himself. At just 16, Hans-Georg Henke was captured by American forces in the war's final days. His tear-streaked face, immortalized in haunting photographs, came to symbolize the collapse of Nazi Germany. Like many others, he'd been rushed to the front, untrained, unwilling, and used as a last desperate measure to stall the inevitable. In the war's final years, both German and Soviet forces sent boys as young as 15 into brutal battles like Stalingrad. Captured or killed, many perished far from home. Faces still innocent, hearts barely grown. They were children sacrificed by regimes that viewed them not as sons, but as expendable tools of war. In December 1941, near Moscow, an elderly woman clung to a young soldier, tears of relief in her eyes. As Soviet defeat seemed inevitable, hope returned. Siberian troops rushed from the Far East and masked by snow, stormed into battle at Galatino. Their fierce counterattack halted the German push and marked the beginning of the war's long and bitter reversal. On May 8, 1945, as Europe erupted in celebration, American troops in Okinawa listened quietly to news of Germany's surrender. But for them, the war was far from over. In the Pacific, they still faced ruthless resistance from dug-in Japanese forces. While peace was dawning for many, these men braced for the bloodiest days still ahead. In July 1942, during the brutal Battle of Voronezh, a Soviet commissar emerged from the trench, Tokarev pistol raised, urging his men forward with desperate resolve. Moments later, he was gunned down. It was part of the German summer push toward the Volga, an offensive met with fierce Soviet resistance and staggering casualties on both sides. On June 22, 1941, Stalin sat in silence inside the Kremlin as he received word of Germany's surprise invasion. Operation Barbarossa, the largest land assault in history, had begun. Caught unprepared, Soviet forces suffered devastating losses in the opening weeks, marking the start of a relentless war that would claim over 20 million Soviet lives. In 1944, during the Battle of Saipan, Japanese civilians fled into mountain caves to escape the relentless combat. In this haunting moment, a mother and her son emerged from the smoke-filled darkness after American forces deployed grenades to flush out hiding places. Fear and panic drove many families to desperate acts, making Saipan one of the most tragic chapters of the Pacific War. Amid the dust and rubble of Peleliu, a U.S. Marine slumps in exhaustion, overwhelmed by the brutal conditions of battle. With searing heat, jagged terrain, and unrelenting enemy fire, even hardened soldiers broke down. Over 10,000 Americans were killed or wounded in the fight for the island in September 1944. An ordeal that laid bare the devastating physical and mental toll of the Pacific War. In Vienna 1947, a mother offers a photo of her missing son to a newly freed prisoner, clinging to hope he might recognize the face. As 600 Austrians returned from years in Soviet captivity, scenes like this played out again and again. Some brought only silence, while others carried fragments of memory that offered grieving families a fragile thread of hope. Amid the chaos of the Blitz, pets endured the terror of war beside their families. In South London, rescuers pulled tiny puppies from the ruins, offering brief glimpses of hope amid destruction. Thousands of dogs and cats were lost to the bombings, yet many were spared by brave children who simply couldn't leave them behind. Worn down and disheartened, a German soldier pauses after a grueling march through the Caucasus in 1943. Battling unforgiving terrain, brutal weather, and relentless ambushes, troops endured starvation, illness, and exhaustion. Many trekked hundreds of miles with barely any rest, struggling as much against their own failing bodies as the enemy. Over 200,000 would lose their lives on this harsh and deadly front. Surrounded by chaos and the eerie quiet between battles, a letter from home became a lifeline. On Iwo Jima in 1945, soldiers clung to these words, reading them over and over like whispered prayers. Messages from thousands of miles away sparked tears, smiles, and the will to endure. In a place where hope was scarce, a simple letter was a precious thread of humanity. As war raged, civilians escaped along shattered roads, pushing the elderly in wheelbarrows and infants in prams. With no transport, they walked for miles through danger, determined not to leave loved ones behind. These acts of desperate ingenuity became lasting symbols of survival and human resilience during the chaos of World War II. Kneeling quietly between empty benches, a British soldier covers his face in prayer. Elsewhere that day, civilians gathered in churches and fields, pleading for the safety of Allied forces and the strength to stand against the Nazi tide. After the fall of France, faith offered a fragile refuge. Many soldiers kept pocket-sized prayer books close, symbols of hope in a world unraveling. Dubbed Mr. Battle of the Bulge, this weary German soldier was captured on film during Germany's final major push on the Western Front, the Ardennes Offensive of December 1944. Fought in freezing cold, thick snow, and dense fog, the battle claimed over 180,000 casualties. His haunting expression came to embody the fatigue and hopelessness of a war slipping from Germany's grasp. Some believe his name was Hans Tarski. In September 1940, children sit quietly amid the rubble of East London, staring at the shattered remains of their homes after a fierce German air raid. Clutching worn toys and dressed in tattered clothes, they are stranded in a landscape of ruin. The Blitz left over 1 million homes destroyed in London. Thousands of children suddenly homeless, lost in the chaos of war. On February 6, 1944, German infantry huddle in the ruins of a house in southern Italy, bracing for the next advance after a Stuka bombing run. The nearby Battle of Monte Cassino raged on, one of the deadliest clashes of the Italian campaign. Urban combat and rugged mountain terrain turned the battlefield into a brutal grind, with devastating losses for both sides. Starvation gripped entire cities like Leningrad, trapped under siege for over 800 days, and Warsaw, where ghetto families fought to survive. Children scavenged through rubble for crumbs, while mothers divided scraps between hungry mouths. In desperation, precious heirlooms were exchanged for a bowl of soup. A single slice of bread could mean another day alive. The cruelty of scarcity was relentless, but still hope refused to die. High above London, a German bomber unleashed its deadly cargo during the night of September 20th, 1940, one more assault in the relentless Blitz. That night alone, nearly 350 high-explosive bombs rained down, igniting fires so fierce they lit the Palace of Westminster from afar. Across the UK, the Blitz would claim over 43,000 civilian lives before it was over. Across camps run by Japan, Germany, and the Soviet Union, prisoners endured starvation, disease, and brutal forced labor. In some camps, daily rations fell below 600 calories, leading to outbreaks of dysentery, scurvy, and deadly infections. Constantly watched by armed guards, many were forced to build railways and airstrips. Some clung to sanity by secretly recording their suffering in hidden diaries.